um, queens couldn't just go up to their husband and be like, hey, I need to talk to you. This is going on. And that time, if a queen, even though she was married to the king, addressed the king without being called, she could be killed. So when Mordecai came to her and said, you need to go talk to your husband, she was scared. And she was like, yeah, I don't think so. Like, I don't want to die. So Mordecai says this famous verse in Esther, and it says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come for the Jews. It will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows? But maybe you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." So basically, he's telling her, if you remain quiet, if you don't help your Jews, God's going to find a deliverer for his people. However, you are not going to be around to experience the benefits of that saving, because you and me, your father's family, are going to die. Esther agrees to go to her husband, and she prays on it, and she talks to God, and the next day, or she goes to the king, and she follows what God has given her, and it's a whole plan. And maybe we need to go ahead and break that whole thing down eventually, and actually dive into Esther so we can break it apart. But for the sake of time and for the sake of this video, she goes to the king, and she's able to save her people. Not only does she save her people, but she becomes a well-known queen. Her uncle becomes the right hand of the king at the time. So she gets to save her people, and then she gets to experience the blessings of her obedience. Now let's flip to Samson and Delilah. Now, in the story of Samson, Samson was born to save his people. He was a man that God gave strength to, of like 1,000 soldiers. And he had rules and regulations he had to follow. And his purpose was to defeat the Philistines. He was born for that, to free his people from the Philistines. However, Samson was governed by his flesh, by his lust. He had a thing for the women. And not only did he have a thing for women, he had a thing for the women that were not of his culture. And in that time, that was taboo. So especially that he had a thing for the Philistine women, the people that he was sent there to overtake to free his people. Okay. Fast forward, he meets Delilah. Delilah comes at him, and she is this woman of the street. She about the streets. She about her paper. So he gets in with her. He falls in love with her. The Philistine soldiers come to Delilah and like, hey, get him to reveal his secrets. We're gonna pay you some money. She's about it. So she goes to Samson, and she's like, okay, tell me. Blatantly, she asks him, how do I defeat you? How do I subdue you? And 3 times he tells her. Three times he tells her that he makes up a story, and he tells her. And 3 times she calls the Philistines to come get him. Samson doesn't get it. Samson never thinks, let me get out of here. You know why? Because Samson was full of pride. I believe that Samson was defeated more than anything by his pride, because he had killed so many Philistines. I don't think he ever thought anyone could overtake him, overpower him. I don't think he ever really considered the fact that he could be tricked into giving up the secret to his weakness. But Delilah was relentless in asking, so relentless that eventually he gave up the secret. Now I'm going to pause there and say, Delilah represents the enemy in so many ways. The Bible says that the enemy is always looking to devour us, and that we have to be aware, always watching always be aware of what's going on and what's coming at you. The Bible says that the enemy is like the thief that comes in the night. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. He's always coming. He's relentless. So Delilah is relentless in asking Samson about how to subdue him. Eventually he tells her. When he tells her, the Philistines come, they gouge out his eyes, and they put him into slavery. Now several things happen here. one, his pride allowed him to believe that it could never happen. And two, he was disobedient. And God gave him several chances, because every time he told her some made up story and the Philistines came, was God showing him what would happen if you continue down this road. Samson never stopped, never paused. He continued going down this road. And again, I believe it was pride that didn't allow him to see what could happen to him, even though God was showing him over and over again. Till finally the Philistines grabbed him and gouged out his eyes and put him into slavery. Samson lost everything for his disobedience. But God. Samson's weakness was his hair, and once they shaved it, they were able to take him captive. But don't we know that hair grows back? So probably a couple of months, maybe a couple of weeks into his capture, the Philistines are so happy. They finally captured the man that had killed so many Philistines in the past, the man that they could not overtake. They finally have him. They decide to throw this big jam, this big party. And all the Philistines are there at the time. Everybody that you could think of, all the important people, and then some were there. They bring out Samson. They're like, bring him out so we could go ahead and get entertained by his weakness. So Samson comes out, and he looks like this feeble man because he had become so weak because they cut his hair. And he asks them, please put me against the pillars that hold this house up, hold this palace up. And they do. And because, like I said, hair grows back, Samson had a little bit of strength in him. And with what had happened to him, Samson also had been humbled. So Samson whispers this prayer to God. This mighty man who once yelled had a whisper only left in him. And what he whispered was, Sovereign Lord, remember me again, O God. Please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my two eyes. And he put his hands against the pillar, and God strengthened him enough to knock down that whole palace, and everyone in it was killed. Samson killed more people at his death than he did throughout his life. More Philistines, should I say, throughout his life. In his death than throughout his life. But he also lost his life in the process. So this is Iris from the Warrior's Walk saying, don't let your disobedience, don't let your pride keep you from receiving everything God has for you. Esther moved ahead despite her fear, despite what could happen to her, despite the consequences, had faith and was obedient. And her life was different. She became the queen of all queens. Samson chose disobedience and pride, lost everything. Don't lose your blessing because of disobedience. Walk in faith. Walk in courage. Walk knowing that God is always with you. This is Iris from the Warrior's Walk, saying be blessed, be a blessing, and keep walking, warriors. Keep walking.